Yo, team building is a huge topic, so much so that I'll have a two-part video, this one to address fundamental key concepts and another part to go over every character's playstyles and synergy tips since that's been requested. Basically a shortened version of how to play every character. So team building has grown and evolved a lot since the release of the game, but a lot of its outlook is honestly outdated. So that's why this video is here to serve as a guideline and modernize your approach to create teams in this age of Dragon Ball FighterZ. Seriously, the point mid anchor concepts gotta go, and I'll explain why. But before we get started, we always need to make a note on the balance and patches of the game, especially if you're coming back to an unfamiliar update, as balance can greatly impact team's function and quality. Channels like mine will help to keep you in the loop, but always read up on patch notes to understand how nuances and tools change and interact with one another. With that being said, the balance is currently at its peak. Every character is viable and every character can be played with great success. There are easier characters to learn for beginners and others who are more specific, but as you rise up in skill level, these team building concepts become more and more prevalent. Weaknesses become more apparent, punishes become more strict, chances to win become harder. So the importance of maximizing yourself rises since both you and your characters are linked. Everything should work as a whole, a complete unit together. Constructing a team is not just meta chasing or team copying. Every team has different goals, playstyles, approaches, needs, and solutions to the game, even if they're composed of similar characters. What some people find strong, others may not. You should try to find a team that functions but also functions for you. Like, if you don't like having to constantly react in neutral with a counter, then you don't have to force yourself to play a counter character. And if you like a character's approach but hear they're bad, you shouldn't let that turn you away from playing them. So the major goal of this video is to help you build your own team, to help you understand if your team is good, balanced, if your team is effective based on these principles instead of just asking around cluelessly. And you'd be able to come up with your own reasons to play your team in your own order. The first thing to understand is game plan. Game plan doesn't really make a team. A team may have various different game plans to be aware of, which is essentially creating the most favorable conditions to win. Game plans aren't expectations and should be flexible, because if you force it or build a team around one specific goal, you yourself become very vulnerable to counterplay and become predictable, which can lead to inconsistencies in performance. Thankfully, there are 3 different assists for every character to help you with your game plan, all having different purposes to achieve different goals. You have your defensive assist, blocks on ones for mix-ups, neutral ones, tracking ones, and some even having multiple roles. Seriously, it's all over the place. However, with A and B assists recovering much faster now, they're much more favorable to run than C assists. C assists can be very beginner friendly due to its tracking and comboable nature to make it easy to use, but I highly recommend you maximize your A and B assists since you can get like 3 of those assist calls compared to 1 C assist because of the recovery. Although there are some very strong C assists with high value like these invul or high blocks for mixed ones, so I don't blame you. Just be aware and be conscious of your decisions. You want your assist choice to cover multiple purposes though, going back to that key flexible point we made earlier. Every character has a different game plan, which will be highlighted more in part 2, but before we get to game plan, we must first understand positioning and their role in the game. So here's the issue with point mid anchor. First of all, these positions lock you in the game plan already. The common concepts you may have heard as your points build meter and your anchor is your solo comeback character. The downside to the snaking is that it locks your characters in a specific role. People playing a point only keep them as a point and anchor is only viewed as an anchor, but the situation of a match is forever changing, so we don't want to limit your characters, in turn limiting yourself. The strength of every character is forever changing depending on game positioning. So some may not be as strong at the start of the game, but are insanely strong at maintaining leads, for example. And that's kind of the problem with tier lists in general. Some low tiers are better at key moments than others and vice versa. So you want to maximize them depending on the context. And second of all, why are we actively game planning to lose and make a 1-on-3 comeback with an anchor concept? That's my biggest pet peeve, the comeback character. It's much better to use Spark to save 3 characters, to save your team because you'll have assists to help with Oki, combos, neutral, DHC damage, to manage blue life, to rotate around. It's a lot better to use it than saving it and putting yourself in a losing situation. Why do you want to lose? And speaking of Spark, Spark as a resource can be used to negate one of their key game plans, like 2-touching your characters from a 50-50 mix-up, or even using Spark to confirm a happy birthday. Anything for development, not regression, which relates back to being flexible and how the game is forever changing depending on its context. Or even to pop Spark to get a TOD on a problematic character. Especially now that everyone generates meter when solo with limit break buffs, it makes solo value more accessible. Then it's up to your skills to perform with whichever character is left. That's enough of a comeback mechanic. And sure, sometimes you might need to save Spark to get that limit break plus level 3 Spark, and that's part of adapting to the game situation. For those who don't know, if you have 3 characters available, Spark's timer is a lot shorter than when you have 2, going from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 when all 2 of your teammates are dead and you only have a solo character, which adds on to the limit break. So Spark itself gives you damage buffs, gives you meter buffs, on top of being able to jump cancel anything, special cancel anything, and empty vanish if you hold the vanish button. Spark itself mid combo also scales the combo a little bit too, but you should know all these by now. A much better mindset to have as like a quick advice to shift your mental state is to not let your team die in the same order that you started them with. That promotes emphasis on rotating your team, meaning you're helping with your blue life and managing health, limiting 2 touches and all that good stuff. A much better role system I invite you to consider is point pivot support. The key thing about this one is I don't want these terms to dominate and lock characters like just being a point mid anchor, but rather terms to help understand how to maximize characters' value. So let's break them down, starting with this question: what makes a good point? At the start of the game, everything is equal. Round start, same HP, same positioning, same advantage. When fight triggers, the point war begins. The first one to get a hit and ideally kill the opposing point essentially wins the point war, one of the biggest goals to target to win a game, on top of draining resources like Spark, which sets you up for success. The round start situation is interesting, sure, although being aggressive round start may not always be best, since a simple super jump away avoids most options safely. Seriously, you know how many punishes I get on Baby or Bluku or Trunks online because they always do their same punishable options without thought? So a good point needs to be good at this job, achieving advantage from nothing as quickly as possible, giving you an opportunity to use your skills without having a limit on them. Thus, their most important elements are being able to take initiative, with the most flexibility, the most oppression, and the most options in a point war. But more importantly, in neutral, points must be able to approach without needing the opponent to interact, approaching with many different angles to adapt to any situation. Essentially, the ability to move forward even without assist. That's the first misconception: assist usage. Just because you have assists doesn't mean you need to fire them ASAP all the time. If you need them to maximize certain approaches needed to win a situation, yeah, sure, let them fly with the strategies. But if you can confirm and win without them, you'll be able to save your assist for the next touch, helping you for Oki, for damage on the second touch to optimize, or if they block for mix-ups, overwhelming them with a 50-50 after locking them down to guarantee continuous pressure, or even with the accessibility to tag into your other characters depending on game plans and synergy. If you spend both assists without a plan just to spend them, you see how you lose access to all these follow-ups in the future situation, which hinders development? And the goal is to result in a 2-touch to win the point war, meaning your point and team overall honestly has to be able to deal sufficient damage while developing your team as a whole. Now, development is a bit misunderstood, so what is it? We just spoke about how effectively managing assist usage helps with development, but in our previous model, people consider development as just meter generation for the anchor or mid, but it's more than just that. You want to be able to place your pivots in their strongest positions. For example, leveling up Adult Gohan by getting meter is nice, but also giving him true sliding knockdown so it can go into his super strong Oki and pressure after that. So think of letting your point dominate, then being able to tag your teammate in so they can take advantage of their super strong situations, putting them in their strongest settings. So not just for meter, but also putting them in super strong pressure, strong Oki, or even tagging to maximize the combo in some way. Or even setting up these situations to force them to burn a spark, draining their resources is a development for you. Of course, meter gain is nice, which is why you want to develop optimal combos and use assists on your killing combo to maximize it for the rest of the game without having to use supers ideally. But development is more than just that. And just because you have meter doesn't mean you should always spend it on random EX moves as well. Yeah, EX moves are insanely strong now, but if you can get good at movement and neutral, you can be smarter with your meter and thus optimizing your gameplay. So the ability to move forward and approach opponents at will and develop your team are keys for a good point and mindset while playing one. So what's a pivot? By this point, there are a couple different outcomes. You either have the lead, you're preserving some health, or you're down a character. Either way, a pivot is positional and dictates the rest of the momentum. Their role is to stabilize set situations and target specific things. And ideally, your point becomes a support to them to help them achieve this if they're still alive and you're able to tag out effectively. In a way, turning your pivot into a backup point or your point into a backup pivot, but I don't want us to get too fixated with terminology. In some situations, pivot need to be oppressive with a life lead because opponents now need to approach, and pivots are able to manage these approaches more effectively than a point. While a point doesn't necessarily need interaction, a pivot is even stronger when there is interaction. Jiren, for example, is an amazing pivot because if you have a lead, he becomes insane to approach because he is a huge counter character. He can counter your assist, he can counter forward movement, he can counter anything. Jiren is an example of someone that's stronger because opponents interact. But even when the situation is flipped around and say you lose your points, pivots must still be able to operate, being good in pressure and good output, especially since they have some form of resource available for them. Like Jiren, he has pretty solid mix and combo output even if he's on the back end now. The thing is, a pivot is almost like your support 1 character in front of your support 2, both being essential support roles and almost interchangeable at times, but there is one major difference between knowing where to place your character 2nd or 3rd, and that difference is who has higher value. The support in the 3rd role provides the most value for your entire team. This can be in form of an assist, DHC, or even as a mix-up. They're able to help the pivot more than the pivot can help them, meaning every character who is a support can be a pivot if they have a character in a support role that's able to largely enhance their performance. In our Jiren example, let's pair him with Baseku. Baseku doesn't really need extra help with Jiren for neutral or pressure since his various attack angles, projectiles, unreactable command grabs, and more helps us out, but Jiren kinda does need that assist to help expand upon his limited angles and pressure tools and to give him really strong 50-50s. With all these positions in mind though, the key is to keep your team rotating, and this brings us to our final concept to acknowledge. Your team needs to be able to function in every order. This is to limit weaknesses and to limit specific targets on your team, like hitting a matchup thing. For instance, picking a Coolers to counter Baby may be interesting, but it's unstable because if they simply pick a Bluku or substitute or change that Baby around, your initial point war game plan won't be as effective. Speaking of matchups, team rotation helps us alongside of the game position, so the context. Sometimes you might need to preserve a character or strategy for a later matchup or situation, or tag them in earlier to handle said situation. Basically saying different team orders help with different goals and states of the game, so you must get comfortable playing your team in all 3 orders. And our final point, making notes of complete synergy. Basically being aware of 2-way synergies for all your characters. We often focus on supporting only the points, but you should also consider how your points can help your pivot or supports. It's a 2-way street, and if you maximize the synergy between all 3, you can start to lead to complete shells, which is a whole different topic for a future video. Now that we understand proper roles, we can revisit game plans to maximize them. Throughout this video, I gave multiple game plans with an emphasis on winning the point war while maximizing assists, which includes preserving them for a stronger use if not needed, then developing into your pivot or support game plans, which can include continuous pressure, 50-50 mix-ups from very strong level 3s like Android 18s, Goku Blacks, etc., which can in turn draw out a spark for further development, or to be able to consolidate a lead, making said characters even stronger, on top of managing different playstyles and opposing game plans and how they approach the game. And don't forget to always understand how the tagged out characters can still provide value. So keep these concepts in mind while considering your team goals, but also your own playstyles. As stated in the intro, the team needs to work for you, or you may find yourself to struggle to enjoy the game and maximize your strength. The same team can have very different ways of being played and performed, which I find nice because it promotes team expression, and self-expression is always fun. This is probably the most personal part of the game. So let's go over an example of how personal playstyles and preferences can impact the expression of a team using the infamous Fusion Android 17 team. The casual folk will see a lot of tournament experience behind this team, thinking it's meta. At initial glance, you may approach this team for its huge damage, mix-up, and oppressive ability. However, someone like Yasha, who created this team, uses it for a very different purpose for his own playstyle, and that's to be very precise with his pokes, winning in neutral and converting stray hits to maximize them with big damage. He has an emphasis on getting Vegito in to dominate with his very powerful Vegito after placing him in an advantageous position with a life lead, since he's so comfortable and strong with this character. But he actually prefers to just safely return back to neutral where he feels at his best, winning neutral again, converting again. He doesn't recklessly move and poke around, but is sharp with his pokes and tries to put meaning behind them. And if he ever does miscalculate, he has the barrier to help him continue to dominate the neutral realm. While he's not here to talk for himself, we can make these observations and speculate based on his matches. I'm sure he has other personal reasons. When we watch someone like Hikari though, you can notice a few differences. He loves to target specific tendencies opponents have that vary, but he wants to whiff a lot and play this bait whiff mind game between calling the barrier and not calling it and then punishing approaches. He'll make himself purposely very unsafe, or take very unsafe decisions to force reactions out of you, where he's very good at maximizing these situations. So he's very sharp at playing the player and understanding what they think and feel for him to exploit. Unlike Yasha though, he also has a deep comfort with 17. 17.
And he's saving 17.
I don't know if he personally likes him or not, but he tends to tag him in much earlier than usual. He likes to use his level 3, he tends to pressure and play neutral more with 17. It almost feels like he uses 17 as a pivot, whereas others with his team may rely on keeping 17 as a pure support role. And that's why meta chasing doesn't really work. Those were 3 distinct different approaches of using the same team based on different playstyles and preferences. There's definitely even more approaches to them. So don't be surprised if you can't be Hikari with Hikari's team, but you can be yourself with your own team. Damn, that's kinda deep. With all that being said, here's a tier list for every character's positional value that has been created by WTG, the Halik tree, that is kinda ordered except the last bit, going from best to least comfort in that role. It's not evaluating quality, but evaluating effectiveness in their role, so it's not a prescription, more of an open-ended guideline for the creation of your own teams where you can add twists to it for creativity. So to break it down a little bit, these always point characters are built for that role, fitting all the criteria we've discussed and even going up and beyond those capabilities. These tend to be the best points in the game, whereas prefers points would like to be a point as well, but can also provide enough support and have toolkit to be comfortable elsewhere. I think we can all understand most of these placements, but for example, Celes' whole kit and ability as a point is insane. Advancing forward with strong mix-ups, pressure, and even combo damage buffs now, but you can also see game plans of him being tagged into pressure from his strong level 3 situation, although his assists are a bit lackluster at times. Same with Kibu, he's super strong as a point, but you can see him being used in the back for his mix-up assist, I guess. What am I talking about? You never see little bro these days, sadly, even though I love this guy, he's so saucy. All-arounders will fit whatever role you want, to make them for an easy character pick if you need someone, adapting to your other choices. You may see Team Gohan or base Vegeta and wonder why they aren't in the above 2 categories, but Team Gohan has really good DHC damage and interesting assist, and base Vegeta can come in from his super strong level 3 situation to maximize himself as well, in that favorable position. Even the homie Goku Black, my day one, he can be solid in every role, but his weakest tends to be point because his support value is just so high with his strong assist, ability to dominate with a lead, strong mix, and more. Conditional gets a bit interesting because they change a lot depending on whoever's around them because they have specific game plans. Frieza has his zoner strategy or golden strategy. Ginyu has his summons that can be achieved as a point or maximized when coming in for Oki to continue pressure. But even GT or 17, GT can be a very effective point if paired with support characters due to his mix-ups and mobility, but can also be a helpful support to points because of his huge assist value and Genki Dama damage. So they have advantages depending on team composition. Preferred supports are characters who can play points but prefer the support role as either the pivot or the 3rd slot. They can't be point if you have no one else though. We spoke about Jiren, but even Baby, his whole zoning strategy is insane when he has a life lead and he becomes even more oppressive on top of all his other tools. But some shells are very strong with Baby point like the Baby Nappa one. But these tend to be much stronger when they do get a bit development to help them out. And strict supports are always going to be in your 2nd or 3rd slot. Again, the exact spot of them between a pivot or final support on your team depend on how much value you place in them based on your team. You may see a lot of these characters changing from the pivot or support role on different teams like Beerus, Trunks, Hit, Gohan. I see them flip-flop a lot between the 2 positions depending on the entirety of the team and personal preference. And from there, analyze synergies, check DHCs, mix-ups, Oki, stray conversions, anything extra you can get from them, and make sure you keep them personalized. There are more specific advanced methods of building a team, such as the triangle method or single character method based on these concepts, but hopefully WTG or the Halik tree will come back to cover that maybe. I hope you enjoyed and learned some things here. If you did, leave a like, and I hope these concepts can become more modernized and mainstream so we can see more of that. And let me know if you want that part 2. It might take a little bit extra time to get to that, but we'll see. See y'all next time, man. Peace.